Hello and welcome to the VWAP trading tutorial. In this video, I'll cover one of my most essential tools, which is the VWAP and what it stands for, what it means, and how I like to trade it. Before much ado, let's get into it. To start off, I'd like to preface one of my earlier tutorials. This is one of my most important and oldest tutorials, and I think it still is relevant today. So before we understand how to trade it, let's look at what the VWAP actually is and what it means. So the full form is volume weighted average price. What does that mean? It means that it is an aggregate metric that multiplies the sum of price over a certain interval and then multiplies it with the volume traded for that contract within that interval and then divides it by the total volume across the entire field of vision. Okay. Now, that's a lot to take in, but we will look into it on the chart and it will make a lot of sense. Essentially, you can think about it as evaluating price with respect to volume. So the VWAP, if price and volume move together, the VWAP would move in the direction of price. If price moves without any volume, the VWAP would not move as much as price. And as you can imagine, this shows you the aggregate positioning across the entire market. Now let's go to a chart and let's see how we want to talk about it. Before we get to the chart, let's look at the tutorial. Let's look at the settings. The settings is extremely simple. Standard settings, anchored VWAP, and the only thing you have to look at is the bands multiplier. I sometimes use a band, sometimes I don't. This source setting is important. You can either anchor it to a high or a low, and you can change the setting accordingly. Now let's go to a chart and let me show you how I manage the VWAP in real time. All right then. If you guys don't know where to find the VWAP, you can go to the left-hand side of your screen and you can just find this icon. This is the anchored VWAP tool. You can anchor it anywhere. Even if you set your settings to defaults, it still gives you something, right? I usually anchor it to the highs, where the source is the high, okay? And, I let you know how I use it in a moment, okay? For now, let's just keep the standard setting of HLC plus 3. You can change the color as you see fit. Let me just show you how it works on the chart, okay? So we turn on our volume, as you see. Now, when price and volume move together, the VWAP is an aggregate of volume with respect to price, okay? Now, what does that really mean? As you can see here, this little region, before this entire period, okay, this entire period, volume was really low compared to the spikes here and there. But the moment we had this spike, and because of this, like VWAP was flat, right? Mostly flat. Now, where the huge turn in VWAP came at this moment when we had this volume spike. Now, what does that actually mean? It means that whenever a price move is supported by volume, the VWAP moves a lot. And it shows you can't really use it as a support resistance tool, but it shows you that market position has shifted to the downside and that there's a lot of volume pushing price lower. So even when we have this recovery, which is a low volume recovery, as is apparent from the decline in volume here, it retests the VWAP and it moves lower. Okay. Now we get to the most important part of the video. How do we use it? The checkpoints are price, naked volume, liquidations, and market structure. Now, first of all, the context of price is the most important part. If we look at the structure from our range, and this is a short that I took in the moment, and this is where we sold all our spot positions around the $105,000 mark, right? Now, how were we able to catch that? Price was in an uptrend for several months, and then the recovery, every dip we had earlier was just met with a strong recovery, but then the dips were met with weaker and weaker recoveries, which made me look for an exit on spot positions and a short on perp positions. Now, if you look at the high, this is just a daily high where we had an SFP. The SFP was subsequently met with rising volume, and this is just the perp pair. Ideally, you want to check naked volume on the perp pair, which is the Bybit perpetual contract that I'm viewing right now, and you want to check it on the spot trading exchanges as well. Here, just to keep it simple, I'm looking at perps. Now, if we look at it, we had a volume spike moving into this, right? Moving into this, we had an SFP and price dumped, and we failed to recover on any momentum above, right? Another important point to note is that price was making, like initially, price swept this low, and then price was about to make a high, which it could not, and it swept the high with high volume. But if we look at market structure here, in my eyes, this is bearish market structure. And ideally, I would like to anchor it at the last known highs. So this is the level that I would look for. in terms of bearish market structure. And this high volume dump is when I started looking for it. And this bearish retest is what confirmed my suspicion that we might be beginning a trend to the downside. Now, when I see that, I also combine it with liquidations, which you can track from either CoinGlass or Coinalyze. All right. So just to recap, we had an SFP at the highs, we had structure breaking down, and then we had high volume spikes leading into this event. Correct? Now, what does this tell me? This tells me that I need to anchor my VWAP, as we discussed, at this particular high, and I need to watch for retests. Now, by the time you find out that, okay, this is a good point to anchor your VWAP, is also the time that we would already have these touches, right? So how do we position for a short? We remain patient. We had this bearish market structure break here, correct? And then we had this retest here. This is when you exit your spot positions, which I did. You can go back, check my Twitter. I talked about selling a lot of spot at $105,000. And then after this, we have been shorting, maybe not like a retest of this, but this has been the trend since that time, right? And this is still our biggest, this VWAP is still our biggest enemy. Now, why does this work? The reason it works is because after we had a high volume attempt to break the highs, but we could not get above, we had lower and lower volume. And then aggregate positioning of the market, right, was resembled by this VWAP, which means that every time we've tried to get above this VWAP or the aggregate positioning, price has been shot down and the same sell orders have followed us lower. Let's look at another bullish example of this. Okay. Let's look for, and I'm just looking at this right here with you guys. So bullish example of this would be right here, right? You had a high volume dump and then you had a pretty strong recovery. So if I anchor my VWAP at this, the reason I'm looking for it, okay, let's go step by step. The reason I'm looking for this is that we dumped and then we reclaimed these important lows towards the left. So this is a range low in terms of price action, correct? If you want to mark out a range high, we could either go for this high or we could even go for this high. And this is ideally what I'm looking for right now. Now you see price coming to this level. Every time we move below this level, we have high volume spikes. So we anchor our VWAP at this low and then we go to the low settings of the VWAP, correct? Now, if we go down to the lower time frames for the same chart, we can accurately anchor it at the lows. And this shows us aggregate market positioning. We had this dump, we broke above these lows, we had another dump. Ideally, you would have been chopped up here, but in trading, no two things are perfect. When we started to accept above this and defend these lows, that was your signal to go long. If you missed this move, which was a high volume move, you could have gotten another retest of range lows. And ideally, your trade would look like, if you got in somewhere around here, you would like to have a wide invalidation around these levels, and you would target the range highs for final TP, and you would target this level for TP1. Okay. If you had missed this long, you can ideally long this retest of range lows and then have a tighter invalidation, wherein if you lose the VWAP and you lose the latest high volume low made by price, you would still have the same targets, but your entry and invalidation would be as follows. Now, you could have taken both of these trades for 4.4 hour and 3.8 hour each. That's about how I trade the VWAPs myself, and that's how I found success trading it. I hope you had a nice time watching this video, and I hope this was educational for all of you.